I'm Dr. Heather Monthe from the About the Tea and STEM podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome into episode 9 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, where I'll wrap up my story about my student-paced STEM course and then talk to Craig Sheil about Google JamBoard, EdTech in Math, Desmos, Explain Everything, EduCreations, ShowMe, Google Slides, Screencastify, and Flipgrid. Here we go.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, hello, hello. What up, everybody? My name is Jake, and today I'm going to talk to you about duct tape and educational technology and how in my one crayon short of the Crayola 64-pack mind, the two of them, duct tape and educational technology that is, fit together into an edtech decision-making protocol. Before diving into that, though, a few things off the top. First off, last week I mentioned my new gifaday project, and the response to that has been fantastic. Dozens of people have signed up to be notified when details for the first iteration becomes available, and you can join them by filling out the form at JakeMiller.net/gifaday, Gifaday. That link will be in the show notes for those of you driving down the road or in the middle of a workout right now. Anyhow, what is gifaday? Well, over the last few years, I've created and shared about 165 GIFs on Twitter at JakeMillerTech and on my website, JakeMiller.net. And at the risk of sounding immodest, I'm just going to say it. Lots of people love them. I think what they like best about them is that they can watch them in less than a minute and walk away with new knowledge or a new skill that they can implement right away. So I'm going to try my hand at making a deep dive into one skill at a time and packaging them in something of a correspondence course for people willing to pay a small amount in order to learn a large amount. Have you ever heard of a correspondence course? Back in the day, people participated in these courses where the instructor communicated with them via mail. Not email, mail. So one day you get a letter from your professor and you'd have to read it, do an assignment, and then send it back. Then a week or so later, you'd get something new in the mail and it'd be the next lesson and the next assignment. Well, gifaday is similar. Once it kicks off, subscribers will get an email on Monday of the first week of the course. It'll have a GIF in it that teaches them the first skill related to that topic. They'll watch it, go try it out if they like, and then carry on with their day. On Tuesday, the next GIF comes, leveling them up one more notch. Then on Wednesday, another. And on Thursday, another. Until, GIF by GIF, email by email, they become fully competent and skilled in that tool. And all that they used was 3 or 4 minutes each day. And at the end, they'll walk away with those skills along with an ebook of all of those GIFs and a certificate of completion. The first iteration, which will happen this spring, will focus on Google Sheets. If that goes well, there will be more learning opportunities after that. Interested? Sign up at JakeMiller.net/gifaday, Gifaday, so that you're among the first to know when the first iteration launches. Moving on, as always, at the end of this show, I'll be sharing some of my favorite #EDU duct tape tweets, the new tweeters for this week, some listener content from the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community, and an Apple Podcast review. This stuff is one of my favorite parts of doing the show. The duct tapers have been so kind to me and really are the driving force that keeps me cranking out these shows, so it's fun for me to show some love and give them some shout-outs on this show. I also want to mention that 20 different duct tapers are receiving stickers in the mail this week. I reached out to them after they won the free stickers by tweeting during January of 2019. There were, I believe, about 150 different people who tweeted during January. I'm not sure of the exact number. I don't have it right in front of me. So I put all of those Twitter usernames into a random name picker at flippity.net and picked out the first 20 of them who had not received free stickers from me during the December contest or hadn't been or weren't going to be guests on the show, because I also give them free stickers anyhow. So I picked these other 20 people, reached out to them, got their addresses, and those stickers are already in the mail to them as we speak. They're probably somewhere in a post office being sorted by somebody right now. Anyhow, let's get into the show. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. Okay, so here we are, part 3 of the story of my student-paced 8th grade STEM course from a few years back. For those of you who have been along for the whole ride, you'll remember that it all started with a particularly difficult class. I realized when I stopped blaming the students and started reflecting on what was happening, that the pace of my course was at least partially to blame. The difficult students were either able to move faster than my instructional pace or were not able to keep up with my instructional pace. All of the students for whom the pace was just right, they were perfectly behaved. So I created a student-paced course using a Google site with an ordered list of activities that linked out to digital resources and instructions. The first hiccup was when I realized that some of the students were content to just move very slowly. I fixed that by improving the activities. As they became more engaged in the work, they became more motivated to move forward. The next speed bump that I met was realizing that even though everyone seemed to be on task and moving forward, I did not know where everyone was in the process. I couldn't identify the students who were behind and give them the necessary supports. So I added a Google form to the website. The students filled it out each day, and I knew who was ahead, who was behind, and who had questions. It was also powerful information to have in terms of formative assessment and in being prepared for communication with parents. But then came a new problem. When I told the students that there were 60-some activities on the site and they were expected to finish at least X number of them, let's say it was 40 activities, some of the students panicked. I don't want to stereotype, but often the stressed out students were girls. Not always, but often. They were like little Jessie Spanos. Do you remember Jessie from Saved by the Bell? They'd be all like, OMG, Mr. Miller, I'm really stressed out and I'm so behind in your course. And I'd say, what are you talking about? You're on activity 7 and we're only 3 days into the quarter. To which they'd respond, I know, OMG, that means I have 33 more to go. I'd tell them, right, 33 activities in like 42 days. They'd let out a little pathetic whimper, and I'd try to explain that they were currently completing more than 2 activities a day, so proportionally, they're going to finish the required activities early. But they were busy looking at me like I had 3 heads and saying the word proportionately. It reminds me of how Jimmy Fallon pronounces big words when he's doing his teen girl talk show, Ew, on Tonight Show. Ew. Anyhow, they couldn't wrap their heads around the planning that was involved in this. They were looking ahead at how many different things they had and not just how neatly and nicely it packed into the time that they had to do it, and how if they just kept chugging forward, they were going to be just fine. They were stressed out, and as their teacher, it was my responsibility to do something about it. So, what was my solution? I added a Google Calendar to the course site. So down at the bottom of that Google site, so the top there was the Google form, second was a list of all the activities, and then third, down beneath all of that was embedded a Google Calendar. And in that Google Calendar, I would put the ideal completion dates for each activity. So I would just kind of map out the quarter as if I was teaching it to an average paced group of students. So I'd say, okay, I expect this activity to take 2 days, so I'd go 2 days forward on the calendar and I'd put Activity 1, done. I'd expect Activity 2 to take, let's say, 1 day. So I'd go 1 day forward and I would put an event that said Activity 2, done. I'd go another day forward for Activity 3 that took about a day, and I'd put Activity 3, done. Let's say Activities 4 and 5 would take a half a day, so I'd go 1 day forward and I'd put both Activity 4 done and Activity 5 done. And I would go along this pattern until I reached the end of the quarter. And then I could show to the students, this is the pace you should keep up with. I didn't assign them direct homework, but I would tell them, if you're behind this pace, then that becomes some work for you to do at home. And then the students could look and say like, hey, I'm only supposed to have Activity 4 done today, but I'm on Activity 7. I could relax. I iterated and reiterated to them that they were still to keep moving forward. They just didn't need to do homework if they were in that situation, because those lucky students that got done early were going to do even more engaging activities at the end of the quarter. So this really calm down the stressed out students. They could look at that pace and say, hey, I'm doing great. I'm ahead of pace. I don't need to be stressed out. And it actually helped with some of those students who weren't feeling very motivated. They'd never taken this kind of responsibility for their own learning before. They'd never been empowered to do that. And now they could look and say like, oh, shoot, I'm a little bit behind. I better hustle up, or I better do a little bit of work tonight. So it really was helping manage all of the different types of students in the class to make sure they were keeping up with the right pace, or to feel calm if they were ahead of or right on pace with the course. Now, just so you don't think that my solution was always educational technology or that your solution always has to be educational technology, I realized another problem with this course. When students were working, especially when they were in the middle of an activity where they required a higher level of support, like maybe we used the SketchUp modeling program in the course, and a lot of students needed support on that. I would be circulating around the class and I'd have 5, 6, 7 hands up at any given time. And you know how a lot of students work. They raise their hand and they either A, they start talking while they wait for the teacher, or B, they just completely stop doing anything while they wait for the teacher. Even though they could still keep working on something while they wait, they just wait. That's all they do. Hold their hand up and wait. So I needed to fix this problem because I couldn't possibly keep up with the rate they were raising their hands. And I thought, is there anything technology that I could do to resolve this? And when I couldn't think of anything, I realized, you know what? It doesn't have to be technology. Technology should be used if it's the thing that's the best tool, most efficient and effective tool, but maybe it doesn't have to be technology. And I actually found a tool that wasn't technology based. I went to my local party store and I bought some cups. I bought a set of yellow cups, a set of red cups, and a set of green cups. And then on each computer tower, I set a stack of 3 cups, red, yellow, and green. And at the beginning of every class, I made sure they were all green. And then I told the students, when you have a question for me, switch your cup to yellow and then keep working. If whatever problem you have is keeping you from working, like let's say your computer just shut down and you need my help getting it working again, then that's a red cup situation and I'll prioritize helping you. But if it's a problem where you can keep working while you go, that's a yellow cup problem. So switch to a yellow cup. I found, number one, it helped me figure out which kids needed support. It helped them stop just waiting for me. They would switch their cups and then, move on with what they were doing. But it also helped them think through the level of need that they had. They would say, okay, I could do this while I wait for him, so I'm going to switch it to yellow cup. So then they wouldn't fall in that trap of thinking they just had to wait for me. And look, I solved the problem with something that wasn't educational technology. And that's the educational duct tape metaphor right there. Sometimes duct tape isn't the solution. Sometimes a hammer is a solution or a screwdriver is a solution. Sometimes you need to think about what is the right tool for this situation. And so we keep all of those tools in our teacher toolbox. Oftentimes they're edtech tools, especially if you're like me, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're things that aren't educational technology. Well, enough about me. Let's meet our guest for today.
Today's guest.
All right, today our guest is Craig Sheil. Craig has been a technology integration teacher at Bedford High School in Bedford, New Hampshire for the past 8 years. He can also be found co-teaching graduate-level technology courses for educators at Fitchburg State University, and he is a Google for Education certified trainer. You could follow Craig out there on Twitter at CSheil, that's CSheil, or check out Craig's website, The Sheil Spiel, at craigmsheil.com, or check out his Math with Tech website, which I think we'll probably be mentioning later in the show at bit.ly/mathwithtech. Welcome in, Craig. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you in.
So where Craig and I first got to know each other was last summer in the first cohort of my EDU GIF Academy, which was an online workshop I ran for people learning how to use Camtasia to make EDU GIFs. So it's good to touch base with you again, Craig, almost a year later.
Yeah, it was, in all honesty, I learned quite a bit. And I had been a follower of yours on Twitter with all the EDU GIFs that you had posted. And I saw you made that announcement that you were doing it. I was like, I need to do this. I want to do what he's doing. So I learned a lot. When are you doing the next one?
Well, so I was actually planning on doing the next one in February, but it's currently February right now. And what I found out what I found out is that a podcast is a lot of work. So
I can imagine.
I kind of pushed that back, and I think I'm going to do it this summer. I haven't yet decided on dates, but I'll put a link in the show notes for people that want to sign up to get notified as soon as that comes out, again, as soon as I announce the next one. What I've really enjoyed about it is now, the 20 or so people that did it back in the summer are now making their own. So some of you guys like yourself and sharing them on Twitter. And now I get to share other people's EDU GIFs. So I don't have to make quite as many because now I could just share yours, right?
There you go. Yeah. And in all honesty, it was quite the learning experience. And there can be a lot that goes behind making just one GIF. So I give you kudos for the time that you take to truly provide the best experience in the shortest amount of time possible. You do good work.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's that quote that often gets attributed back to Mark Twain. I don't know if it actually is Mark Twain that originally said it, but it's I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time, where it's like making a 30-second GIF can often take a lot longer than making a 2-minute long video because you're really whittling it down. So it's fun seeing the ones that you're creating too, because you've mastered that art of getting in the essentials and focusing the viewer's attention without the audio. You're doing great stuff with them.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm not as good as you, but I'm trying to get there. So I appreciate that.
The Padawan is becoming the Jedi now. All right. Well, let's jump into it, Craig, with a little bit of 2 truths and 1 lie. So I'm going to let you go here. You're going to give me 3 statements, and I am going to butcher trying to guess which one is the lie because I always do so poorly at this.
All right.
2 truths and 1 lie.
Well, here we go. Number 1, I used to play on a field hockey team.
Okay.
Number 2, my favorite meal happens to be taco salad.
Ooh.
And number 3, I have attended 3 different high schools as a teenager.
Okay, 3 different high schools when you were a teenager. Field hockey. Did you say your favorite food used to be taco salad?
I don't know. Did I?
I don't know. I don't know if you said it used to be or it is.
It is.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if maybe it was your favorite, and then you got mad at taco salad, and you're not a fan anymore.
So the statement is my favorite meal is taco salad.
Okay, and you've eaten taco salad in 3 different high schools. Maybe I'm mixing things together. I think the lie is the high schools. I think it was not 3 high schools. I think it was more than 1, but it wasn't 3.
Oh, very, very interesting. You actually got it. Very good.
Yes. How many was it?
4.
4. Oh my gosh, I was going to guess it was more than 3. So 4 high schools in 4 years.
That is correct. 1 each year.
Man, why were you moving around so much?
It's that good old thing we call being a military brat.
That's what I was wondering, if it was military.
Yes.
Army, Navy, Air Force?
It was the Army.
Army, nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, tell your is it dad, I assume?
It was my father. Yeah.
Oh, tell him thanks for the service.
Actually, he's an educator himself now.
Nice.
So yes.
Nice.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, tell him I said thanks. And then what is the key ingredient to the perfect taco salad, since it is your favorite food?
You know what? It has to be really good salsa.
Good salsa.
Yes, and it has to be the hotter the better. And I actually do enjoy having it with turkey instead of hamburger.
Interesting.
Yeah, I could eat it every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Huh. Okay. All right. Next time I have a taco salad, I'm gonna be thinking of you. But I don't think I'm going to order it with turkey in it.
No? All right.
Okay. We're going to jump into the educational duct tape now. And for those few new listeners...
I'm sure you're over 20 by now. I'm thinking you're over 20.
Okay, well, maybe we're at 21 now then. And for those few new listeners who broke us over 21, a refresher on what educational duct tape is. So educational duct tape is my goofy metaphor that says that educational technology is at its best when it's not the goal of a lesson, but it's a tool being used to solve problems or address a learning standard or meet a goal or address a need that you may have in the educational setting. Much like duct tape, using duct tape is never your goal, but it can be super helpful when you're fixing things around the house. So now that all 21 people are caught up, are you ready for some educational duct tape questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, here's my first question. What are some ways tech can be used in the math classroom to support learning? That's one of those questions out there. Like I worked with this, she was a literacy coach. She's a good friend of mine, so I'm allowed to tease her on here. And when she would teach us about different literacy strategies and things like that to use in the classroom, like Freyer models and all kinds of different stuff, she started saying during her professional developments, like, you could use this strategy in all classes, even in math. And I was a math teacher at this time, and she would always say that. And so we will always razz her about saying even in math. And I think you could use technology even in math, Craig. It's true.
This is true. And I think, a lot of times, when Chromebooks first started to come out and, there's this whole, students will be able to type papers and do research. And there's a lot that can be done in the math science classrooms as well with those devices.
Right. I agree.
Absolutely, it can be used. And I am actually a former math teacher myself, as I had taught high school mathematics for 8 years before I went into this integration role. And I have a lot of passion for it. So I'm glad you have this question. And I think there's a couple sides to this that you can look at. Maybe the first tier would be about, so students, it's important that students write. And not everything should and has to be done on devices. And so if students are in class and they're solving some problems or they're doing some work and they're using whiteboards to do that, or they're writing it on pieces of paper, you most certainly can use the camera on the devices that students have available to them. And taking that picture. And now, I don't know if you remember, Jake, but I think maybe it was a year ago, within the last year, they allowed the camera, inserting an image from camera right in, if you're in Google Slides, for instance, you could take that picture, immediately drop it in, and you have access to the work digitally now that wasn't originally digitally. And I think it can be a great concept if students are all solving different types of equations. Maybe they're solving for the traditional solve for X problem, but maybe students throughout the class have a different problem and they're all uploading to the same Google slide deck. And allowing everybody in class to now have a quick review of that concept.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there, because when I've suggested this in the past, people say, well, like, why have them take a picture of their work if they could just hand me the piece of paper? What do they need a picture of it on the computer for? And you're saying, like, this is the Sammer model right here, right? You're saying we're not just substituting the technology of taking a picture for the act of handing in a piece of paper. You're saying now I'm going to augment it or maybe even modify it or redefine it by having this Google Slides be a collaborative Google Slides and have, like you said, each problem from, say, a set of problems be on a different slide. And then each student does one problem and it has 25 problems to look at. Now, they didn't have to actually type it on the computer. The computer just became the sharing space. It became that little tool that just kind of kicked it up a notch, right?
Absolutely. And it also gives students the opportunity to then comment on each other's or provide a space to maybe type an explanation, or there's a lot that can be done with that. And I just think it can be a very quick way to take something that's not digitally and turn it into something digital, like you said, as a collaborative space.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's one approach that someone in the math classroom could take. Another one is just like gathering data. My math department that I work with, very innovative teachers, and they come up with some really, really cool ideas. And I actually happen to work with one where we do a lot of math training on the side. And, you know, one of the things that he likes to do in his class is he will pose a question. And with that question, it gets students thinking about the particular task and is asking them to come up with as many ways that solution can come up with. So for instance, let's say students have, $5. You have $5, and then give us an example of how many pennies and quarters can be comprised of that $5. And so by providing students a Google form that they go to actually submit their responses. Oh, it's, 500 pennies and 0 quarters, right? That's one entry. And submitting that into a Google form, if you then take that form and provide them the spreadsheet of all of the responses, we can now take our data that we've collected as a class as a whole and use a tool outside of G Suite, Desmos. I think most people know about Desmos by now. It's the very great online calculator as well as investigation tool for math classes. But using Desmos to then take our data from our Google Sheet, copy it all, go into Desmos, paste that in, and now we have data that we can interact with very quickly.
I like that because it takes it from just simply collecting the data from each other, and it makes it really easy to manipulate the data and then ask bigger questions. So if you spend a whole class period collecting the information and everybody plotting it physically on a pencil and paper scatter plot or whatever it might be, you might only have time for a couple of different questions, like what was the pattern of this data or something like that. But when you get it into a spreadsheet and then you get it into something like Desmos where you can look at it graphically, you could then start asking deeper questions and you could start kind of manipulating the data, right? You could say like, well, what if one student's response was this? How would that change our representation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just think obviously we're making the assumption here that students already know how to graph, right? How to plot data points.
Right.
And so maybe in this particular aspect, we're not assessing them on can they do that? We're making the assumption they already know how to do that. So like you said, why are we wasting time where we can dive deeper into some richer questions? And I think it also goes back to if we plot it on the classroom whiteboard, right, and class is over, we can take a picture of that, but now we can't interact with that, right? We would have to now recreate that if we have students come back, if we weren't able to finish our investigation. So just, trying to think differently on how we can collect data from our traditional ways that we might have done that in the past.
Yeah, and something like a Google Form allows you to collect even more data than you would in one class period too. Like, we know the law of large numbers. Like the more data samples you have, the more representative of the whole population it's going to be. So if you're a math teacher that teaches 5 class periods and you collect data on, say, how tall all the students are or something like that, in each class period, they only have their 25 classmates or however it might be to compare. But then if that Google Form collects for all 5 periods, then you have 125 to compare. So you're seeing a more representative sample of students of that age group.
Yeah, and isn't that what we want? We want students to be able to collaborate not only amongst themselves in class, but also a broader audience, right? And I think that says more to students when they can see that they're helping each other out outside of the 4 walls at that particular moment.
Yeah. One of my other favorite activities to do in math along those lines is, we're coming up here on Pi Day, March 14th. And one of my favorite activities to do in celebration of Pi Day is to have students measure the diameter and circumference of a collection of circles. And then notice that if you divide the diameter by the circumference, is that right? No. Divide the circumference. If you divide the circumference by the diameter, it's been a couple years since I taught math. If you divide the circumference by the diameter, you should get roughly pi, right? But if I do it, I might get 2.9. And if you do it, you might get 3.3. And that kid over there got 3.5, because we're all making human error in our measurements. But if you get a large enough sample and you divide it out, you're actually going to end up very, very close to approximating pi. And a Google Form and a Google Sheet, or maybe Desmos, like you're saying, even adding that in kind of gives you the power to grab that large sample size, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the big trick to that, when you do have data in a spreadsheet, this is the trick that a lot of people don't know. When you select your data from the Google Sheet and you just go into Desmos, and on the top left, there's always the spot to add something. If you literally just paste your data in that first cell, your entire table will show up.
Oh, nice.
So it's a really, really cool little aha moment that a colleague of mine, his name's Steph Fritz, shared and kind of blew me away. Whoa, I didn't even know you could even do that.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm looking at the site that, I'm linking in the show notes, and I mentioned off the top, which was the bit.ly/mathwithtech. So I'm looking at that site that you have there, and I see you've got a screenshot of Desmos and some information about Desmos. So if nobody's seen it, that's one good place to look at what it looks like, where you see that table being put in, and you see it actually on the coordinate plane, the graphical representation of it. Is this site related to like a presentation? Is that what this is for?
Yeah, we several times throughout the year, my colleague Steph Fritz and I work together and deliver PD for math teachers in the New England area. Yeah,
okay.
We usually do a couple during the summer, as well as 1 or 2 during the school year.
Oh, cool. So people could visit this to see that screenshot, and then if they're interested in maybe signing up for that workshop, that's a possibility right there, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So do you use, this is a side question here, do you use Desmos for the activities that are in there? Do you use that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with them.
Yeah, and I just think both Steph Fritz and I met Eli, I believe is his name, who I think is the CEO of Desmos, at a math conference this past fall. And it was just really cool to see, the vision and just to hear their whole concept and why. And a lot of, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of their employees are now, I think he said the majority of them are now educators.
Oh.
Where it used to be coders, and their focus is truly on education. And I just like the model of providing a tool that is free and allowing learners to learn and engage with math very easily, whether it's through the card sort. That's a really cool activity. The marble slides, I know, are always engaging for students. So if you've never used Desmos, definitely take a look at their activities. And I just wish when I taught math, and I had mentioned I taught math 8 years ago, like none of this existed, right? And it's one of those moments I say to the math teachers I work with, I wish I had something like this when I was teaching, because I think I'd be able to get at more of the students to understand some of the concepts that I was sharing with them.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. It's been a year since I was a math teacher, and I wish I had it then too. And I find it's really, really good that Desmos teacher activities are really, really good for high school. But I've noticed that there's more and more popping up for the lower levels. Like I was looking at one the other day, was teaching addition and subtraction of mixed numbers. So they're getting there with a lower level stuff, but they are just fantastic for like high school algebra and algebra 2 classes. They've got such great activities in there.
Yeah, they do.
Super cool stuff. But like you said, just using the graphing calculator that's in there with some data is really a great way to go with math. So I recently was working with a couple different math teachers that I was doing some coaching with, and they were looking for, well, they're actually elementary school teachers, so they taught multiple subjects, but they were looking for, what can I do in my math class? And my suggestion across multiple grades and across multiple mathematical topics was essentially the same. And the actual tools that I'm going to recommend are going to be different based on the device you're using in your classroom. So I'm going to say my answer first, just assuming you're using iPads in your classroom, which probably is a less typical option. But let's talk about that first. So what I would recommend, and this is kind of similar to what you were recommending with the Google Slides earlier, what I would recommend is to use an app like Explain Everything or ShowMe or EduCreations and have students record kind of whiteboard screencasts of themselves solving problems and explaining their problem solving strategy. Think, for those people who might not be familiar with those, think of the Khan Academy videos that are so recognizable. It'd be very similar to a Khan Academy video. But then not just recording the video, but then actually taking it and uploading it to a Flipgrid so that they could see each other's responses. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Flipgrid. It could be like a bunch of videos on a Google Slide would work too, or on a site or something like that. But I really like Flipgrid because it's kind of made for that. People sometimes don't realize that you can actually upload responses into Flipgrid too. So they would take that video in EduCreations or whatever, whichever app they choose, download it, and then upload it to Flipgrid for everybody else to see. And where I really like this, and this is very similar to what you were saying earlier, is either A, having each kid do a different problem, so then they can go in and see how a lot of different problems are done, or B, having each kid do the same problem, especially if there's different possible strategies, and then seeing different ways of approaching it. And that way the kids are not only being exposed to different ways to do their work, but they're also starting to learn that people have different perspectives and different ways about going about things, and they're all valid and they all have validity. And it's not just about like who's the fastest or who got the right answer. Sometimes it's just really fascinating to see how other people are explaining and thinking of things. So maybe you're a third grade teacher and the kids are learning their basic division facts. And so you give each kid a different division fact, and maybe you differentiate a little bit. And if a kid's still learning their division facts, maybe you give them something like 8 divided by 2 that you're pretty confident they could figure out. And if a kid maybe has them pretty well mastered, maybe you give them 72 divided by 9, right? And then each kid posts that solution and they could see all of those different facts. Or the second option is every kid in the class gets 72 divided by 9. And then maybe you see, oh, well, this kid drew 72 circles and divided them up into 9 groups and found out that there were 8 in each group. Well, this person over here in this video took 72 circles and circled groups of 9 and found out that there were 8 groups of 9. And this kid over here drew a square that was 9 units long and figured out how many units tall they had to make it to be until they got a grid of 72. And it was 8 rows tall. And this kid over here wrote out 9 times blank equals 72. And they figured out it was 8. And there were more strategies than that. But that way those kids can then watch those videos and see each other's strategies and actually grow from the expertise of their classmates, you know?
Yeah, it's a valid statement that people can get at an idea or a solution differently from somebody else. And videoing is such a great way to showcase that. You can't hide from a solution on a piece of paper, with the answer of a 7, let's say. But when you require students to actually speak it, it goes a long way because you can see where their thought process was throughout solving that problem and have a better idea of where their successes and failures may have been.
Yeah, it can make a really good formative assessment tool too. Like you're saying with the failures, that you might look at it and go like, this is where she's making this mistake, or this is where he's making this mistake. This is what I need to, help this student with. Where instead of just saying like, oh, you're getting the wrong answers, you're able to see, oh, what you're doing is this little part that we could fix, and now I understand what's going on. You could resolve that for the kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was saying that different answers based on different tools. So if you have iPads, there are 3 apps that I can think of off the top of my head. They're EduCreations, ShowMe, and Explain Everything. If you're on a Chromebook, which most listeners probably are, if it's a new Chromebook, then you could use Explain Everything, the Android app, as long as your school has turned on the ability to add Android apps. If you haven't done that, then there's a couple different options. One is to take a Screencastify video of students, like say using their finger on the screen or a stylus on the screen in Google Keep, where you could actually write. So Screencastify would be recording what they're doing in Google Keep and their voice. That would work. It'd be a nice little hack for it. And if it's not a touch screen, one thing you could do is actually take the laptop and physically turn it around and aim the screen downward at a piece of paper. And then the kid can be writing on that piece of paper while Screencastify or whatever your screencasting app is takes a video of that. I actually made a GIF of that I'll stick into the show notes, but it's a nice way to, hack. If you've got a 4-year-old Chromebook that's not touchscreen and doesn't have Android apps and you know iPad, so what are you going to do? Well, you can actually take a video from that camera of a piece of paper, and you have to turn it around so that it's not upside down. The video would be upside down otherwise, but that's one way to do it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think our school is fortunate that we even have individual smaller whiteboards for every student. Yeah. If students would rather write things down on a whiteboard and actually then use that to walk through the process and explain their thinking. But yeah, we absolutely use Screencastify, or we've even had students, if they're doing it on the Chromebook, even record right through Flipgrid itself. But yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, that's totally true. If they're just using the webcam aimed at a dry erase board or a piece of paper, you don't need Screencastify in there. You could jump right to Flipgrid and just start recording from in there. And that's a great way for kids to see each other's thought processes and for the teachers to be able to do some formative assessment kind of quickly and be able to go back and actually see their thinking without having to say to the kids, you didn't show your work on this piece of paper. Like you actually see a video of them going through the problem.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the day when more and more of our students will be having touchscreen Chromebooks, because I think it'll just be a lot easier for our students to be able to showcase their work.
Yeah, I totally agree. You could tell we're both math teachers. We're excited to talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah, we're geeking out right now.
Geeking out a little bit about the mathematics. So Craig has, I'm going to link it in the show notes, but I mentioned it before. His website is bit.ly/mathwithtech. That's his special site that relates to tech. And he's got some other tech ideas in there for the math teachers. But for those people who are like, oh, stop talking about math, let's move on to our next question, Craig. So I think you have one for me here.
I do, and I promise it is not math related.
But you could use it even in math.
You can.
Right?
That you can. All right, Jake. So my question for you is, how can students problem solve a task or situation digitally in a collaborative manner?
So I'm going to give an answer here, and I've got to be honest, I gave this answer a couple episodes ago, but I just really like this strategy. And I'm also, I think I know what you're going to say, Craig, because I've seen you tweeting about it, and I'm jealous of you that you have one of these to tweet about. But I'm gonna save that answer for you. I'm gonna be a gentleman and let you answer that after me. So my maybe subpar suggestion compared to yours is Google Drawings. And what I like about Google Drawings is, number one, obviously it's collaborative, which you said that word in there. So one kid can create the drawing, share it with multiple kids, and then they essentially have this white space to just problem solve in. They could put in pictures, they could put in writing, they could draw shapes, they could use the commenting feature, they could use the chat along the sidebar, or they could be in person doing that while they're all interacting on the screen. It's just such a great way for everybody to kind of have their own space that's shared on the screen and kind of work at the same time and be able to represent their own thinking where other people could easily see it and then be able to manipulate it too.
Yeah, I think Google Drawing is like one of those it's that hidden tool that I don't think a lot of people know that they in fact can use it, and it can be very helpful.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, why use drawings? Because you can use slides. And in some situations, I agree with that. But in this situation, I think drawings really lends itself to this collaborative planning or problem solving or ideating situation where you're all trying to collaboratively think through the same thing. So you don't need multiple slides. So I think drawings really lends itself really well to that.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. So what do you got for me?
All right. So recently, Google had tweeted out that there's a grant for JamBoards. Mm-hmm. And so we've been doing a little digging and investigating on how JamBoards can be used in the classroom setting. And so we, in fact, our school was granted a couple JamBoards. And so I've been kind of excited to play with this with colleagues. And their tagline with JamBoard is transforming learning, and how can we get students to collaborate maybe differently than what they're used to. And so basically for those that are unaware, JamBoard is an official G Suite tool in that waffle. Your district admin for your Google domain may not have that activated. And so that would be phase one if you're curious to investigate this tool. But there's 3 different versions of this. There's the JamBoard board itself, that physical thing. Then there is JamBoard web version. And so that's jamboard.google.com or just clicking it in the waffle icon. Or if you had mentioned, Jake, earlier, students who may have a touchscreen Chromebook and have Android apps turned on, you can get the JamBoard app as well. So there's 3 different versions to JamBoard. But like I had said, we were very fortunate to receive 2. And our students do not have touchscreen Chromebooks. So our students have been exploring it with the web version, jamboard.google.com version of it. And just trying to figure out, so how can we get students to truly collaborate? So a lot of times we would say to students, and we still do, all right, in groups of 3, you need to put together a Google slide presentation on an entrepreneur. Right? So what typically happens? All right, person A, you go figure out these things. B, you go do this part. And C, you go do this part. And then it just gets all put together and we're done. Mm-hmm. And so one could argue, is that true collaboration? Or is it we're all individually doing our own thing and then we just happen to be presenting at the same time? Right?
Right.
And so what I've been kind of witnessing with bringing in the JamBoards, I'll give you one instance. We brought it into a psychology class and they had different groups who were responsible for different parts of the brain. And so the teacher asked the students to quickly do some research. Everyone has 15 minutes to research. And then individually, we had groups come up to the board and they had 15 minutes to visually communicate that part of the brain. And they were talking to each other. Do you think we should use this picture or do you think that picture? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're in the Google slide mentality, it's, all right, I'll go find a brain picture.
Mm-hmm. So it's a great example of collaboration, not cooperation.
Absolutely. It's been a really cool, just a little aha moment for me. We've used the JamBoard, and one of the science teachers next gen science standards and posing a question. And we've used the board to actually draw up a model of answering the question, what's the phenomena with the message of a bottle and how it goes from one part of the world to another? And how does that work? And draw a model. And we've been using that JamBoard to do that. It's so kind of your Google drawing just taken to another level, right?
Now, so the only difference, well, I mean, there's more than that, but the big difference between using the jamboard.google.com and using drawings is Jamboard does drawing with a bunch of different pen tools, and it does sticky notes, but that's it on the web-based. Is that right? You can't add pictures in?
For right now, yes. I believe in either a week or two, being able to add pictures will be available on the web version.
Oh, great.
So I'm really excited about that because, as you had indicated, there is some limitation right now to the web version.
Right.
But even you mentioning sticky notes, what I really like about the Jamboard is when we've had instances where we've asked all students to join a jam. That's what the files are called, a jam.
A jam sesh.
Yeah. And so I'm adding my own sticky, but you can imagine now there's 20 stickies, and now 2 students in front of the actual board can now provide a discussion with the class of, so how should we categorize these stickies?
Yeah.
How should we organize it? And then they're able to now move those stickies and interact with it.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to that math example of collecting data. If it's on a whiteboard, you take a picture, but then you can't interact with that picture, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about Jamboard, we now have all these questions in this jam file. We can bring that back up the next time we are with our students and can continue where we left off.
Yeah, I like that. And now it's just dawning on me now, too. I was talking about using, say, Screencastify to record a student doing a math problem. They can now use Google Keep as the place to do the math problem. They can now use Jamboard. Even if they don't have a physical Jamboard, they could use it on their computer as their white space to be drawing on while they're recording too.
Absolutely. And I should mention that you don't need a physical Jamboard to be able to, I don't want people to think, oh, we're never going to get a physical Jamboard. I'm not going to. I recommend people do investigate, and slowly but surely you'll find different ways by which you can actually utilize this new official G Suite tool.
Yeah. I've been amazed how little I've heard people talking about it now that it's available for people who don't have Jamboards to just hop on and use online, regardless of device. I would think that people would be going nuts using this, but I don't hear much talk about it. I think maybe they don't realize it. They don't know that that's out there. That's a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I don't think people really know that it's out there. And like I had indicated, as far as I'm aware, Jamboard, when it got pushed down to everybody's domain, it's default not active, and the actual admin of the domain has to turn that on. So I think that's also part of the reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in our district, when I was ready to use it, it wasn't turned on, so we had to go in and manually do that. So I'm in it here right now. I was kind of doodling while you were talking. I promise I was listening, Craig.
No, that's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
And I just to share with the listener, so the jams don't save in your drive, I don't believe, but they do save on jamboard.google.com. So every time you go back, you'll see all your old jams, and then you could take those jams, you can rename them to organize them. You could download them as a PDF, and while they're open, you can't do it while you're on the main Jamboard screen, but you could download them, I believe, as an image file. Yeah, save frame as an image file. So you could save individual frames, and then as you're in Jamboard, it automatically adds more frames. So think about like Smart Notebook or something like that, where you're on slide 1 doing a math problem and you're ready for a new math problem. You go to slide 2. Well, in Jamboard, you just go to frame 2, and you can keep, I assume, unlimited number of frames within your jam as you kind of keep going.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll mention, they actually do save in your drive.
Oh.
And so you can, in fact, under recent, we'll be able to find it there. You'll also find that the Jamboard is hidden in the more section. Right. So when you say new and Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, and more, and just hover over that, you'll see that Jamboard will show up. So all your files, it's an official G Suite tool, and all of your files are located in your drive, and it works just like a Google Doc does. So you can share this. I believe, I could be wrong with this, but I think it's up to 25 users at a time can be in a jam. So there's this real collaborative element to this. And recently I had written a blog post, and maybe I can share the link with you, of just like 5 different ways that we've utilized in 5 different curriculum areas on how we've used this with students as well as staff. It's even great for teachers, collaborating, deciding, so how do we want to do task A in our curriculum? And teachers can even use a JamBoard to put their ideas and thoughts, and it's kind of like Padlet in a way.
Yeah.
Or it can be used like Padlet in a way.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't know. I'm glad you pointed that out about it being in your drive, because what I was looking for is some kind of folder to find the jams, and there's not like a JamBoard folder. It just goes right into the general My Drive folder. So if you sort by last modified, it will be the topmost thing. And like you said, it's there in your recent. And then under the new button, you could create one from right there. You don't have to go to jamboard.google.com to do that. One thing I found interesting, I don't think I had that option there until I made my first one.
Interesting.
There's no way of checking that now. Who knows? But so if you go to create, if you go to new and then go down to more and you don't see Google Jamboard there as an option, I do. But if you don't, go to jamboard.google.com and maybe it'll appear the next time you're in there. Who knows?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I think I want to mention is in the Jamboard app from the Android Play, or as well as iOS, right? So you can get Jamboard on your if you have an iPhone, or the Jamboard itself. There's other features that are available. And so it can do predicting text. So you can actually be writing. So I could write my name and it'll convert it into text. You can use AutoDraw. Have you heard of AutoDraw?
Yeah.
So it has that same element. So as if I'm drawing a tree, the artificial intelligence, the bottom is predicting what you're drawing, and you can quickly convert it into a tree.
No way.
It also has shapes, and you can do internet searches, and you can do selfies.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things that you can do outside of the current version of the web.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potential with this new tool.
Yeah, I was surprised when I went to the web-based one, because it literally is just the different pen tools, the eraser, and sticky notes, and that's it. And I was like, well, this is kind of limiting. And then I thought, like, I played with a Jamboard back in June, so almost 9 months ago when I was in New York at Google, and I was like, I swear I was adding pictures and taking pictures there. And so then you said, yeah, the physical Jamboard has more capability than the web-based, but they're adding to the web-based. But now here I am, I'm downloading the iOS app so I could try it out. And you're right, there is other stuff you could do in here other than what you could do in the web-based version. So I'm opening up the Jam I was just working on my computer, and I could add in drive files. I still have the pen tools and everything. The AutoDraw feature, that's going to be so cool. So for those listeners that aren't familiar with AutoDraw, what AutoDraw is like Craig was saying, if you're drawing a dog or whatever, and you're not a great artist, Google will say like, oh, I think you're trying to draw a dog. If that's what you want, click on this dog right here, and we'll put in this drawing of a dog for you instead. And you get a better version of a dog in there.
Yes, because I can't draw dogs, so I'll take anything that a computer will suggest.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So on the app, there's all kinds of stuff in here. So I can add people from here, which I could do on the computer too.
Yep.
But I could present to a meeting. I could add files from Drive. Gosh, look at all this stuff. I can add text.
And that's a great thing, that Drive feature. A couple times we've had students who maybe had done something in a Google slide deck.
I'm sorry. I was drawing on my phone and I saw it coming up on the computer, and I was like, "Who is in my jam?" Like, no, that's
you.
me.
That's you.
That's me. Okay, sorry, Craig.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So what's really great about that ad from Drive is we've had students who maybe have done some pre-work and in maybe a Google slide deck, and they're like, "Ooh, I'd really like to use slide 4 and 7. And pull it up on the Jam." And so we've actually done that. And so, from the phone, upload the actual Google Slide file, and then go to the actual Jamboard itself. And we've pulled out slide 4 and slide 7.
Mm.
So there really is a lot of potential there.
Yeah, that is cool. I'm actually not finding the AutoDraw on the iOS app. Maybe that hasn't come to it just yet.
And maybe it isn't, now that you say that, I'm thinking it isn't on the iOS, but it definitely is on the Android, on Chromebooks, as well as the JamBoard board itself.
Oh, cool. One other thing that I'm seeing that's on the iOS app that I'm enjoying too is it doesn't really have a name here. It's kind of like a laser pointer tool where it looks like you're drawing on the screen, and then it disappears as you do it. And so I'm drawing on my phone, and then I'm seeing it appear and then disappear on my computer screen. So if you're just trying to draw people's attention to something while you're presenting or while you're talking, you don't actually modify the drawing. This is a pretty awesome tool, and you can tell it's going to grow more. We all know Google, and Google keeps on adding and improving their things until you're like, wow, it's barely recognizable from where it started.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been great, Craig. I'm excited to hear about the JamBoard, and I learned some new stuff about JamBoard that I didn't realize was possible. One last question I want to ask you is how you think a JamBoard compares to a Smartboard. I don't know if you're also a Smartboard user. Where do you see the pros and cons between the two of them?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've shared with staff is the JamBoard is not your fancy projector for class presentations, and instead it's meant more for small collaborative group work. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think when Smartboards came out, it was, in the front of the room, look at the teacher and I'm going to show you and I'm going to move some things around. Right. Yeah. Whereas I've really been stressing this idea and this concept of this JamBoard truly trying to transform learning. So instead of us all listening to the teacher in front, let's get a group of students around this board and let's talk through this particular task and let's try and problem solve and come up with a solution. I've been trying to treat it as really not just a fancy new projector. Yeah. That's located in the front of the room. And I think that's kind of helped along the way.
Yeah. I think if somebody gets it to be a fancy projector or to be a Smartboard, they're going to be disappointed because they've got to change their, not necessarily pedagogy, but their strategies of how they're using it if they use this. You can't just say okay, well, let's take down all the Smartboards and let's put up JamBoards unless you're going to actually change what you're doing with the tool.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And so with that, we still have that projector on the side, right? But using this board for different group work activities.
Right. And that really is the educational duct tape thing there as we kind of tie a bow on this conversation. There's not a better one between JamBoard and Smartboard. It's not JamBoards are better because they're newer, they're Google, and it's not Smartboards are better because they're software and they're not web-based and you could put in pictures or whatever you could do differently in there. You start with what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to create a collaborative learning environment where people work together and ideate together and problem solve together, then maybe a JamBoard is the way to go. If you're trying to create a front of the classroom way to teach your math class, maybe a Smartboard is better, or maybe you need to change your strategies. But regardless, whatever your strategy is, then you could choose what tool best fits it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I should mention, our teachers still use Smart software to have those discussions with students. But yeah, I absolutely agree. There's a time and a place potentially for both of these tools.
For both of them.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Agree. And just like that front of the classroom direct instruction from the Smartboard, there's a time and a place for that too.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't have to go away in favor of all collaborative stuff, but we should do what is best for our students, for our learning standards, for our teaching style and all that stuff, and just do what's right for our kids.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, Craig. Well, this was a good time. So again, I'm going to fill everybody in on your contact information and everything. So you can find Craig on Twitter at Sheil. It's SHEIL. His website, again, the Sheil Spiel, I love that name of your favorite website, is CraigMSheil.com. And again, the website we talked about for the math stuff, the math PD and math resources and math ideas is at bit.ly/mathwithtech.
There you go.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here today, Craig. It was a blast.
Hey, you know what? It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it was fun. All right, what a great time it was talking to Craig. Such a good dude. It was fun talking to him. I hope you'll all follow him to learn more about JamBoard and things like that. And if you try a taco salad at any point in the near future, let him know, what kind of meat you have in it and how it is. I know he likes to be kept up to date on taco salad happenings in the area. He's a big taco salad fan, I guess. All right, as always, let's wrap up the show with some stuff from our Duct Taper community. First up, an Apple Podcast review. This one comes from Papa Muntz, Papamunts, whoever you are, thank you so much. And it was titled, all capital letters, just wow. It says, educational duct tape is a conversation I've been having with my team of tech integration coaches all year. We've been talking about how to help our teachers to make that mental switch. Every time I listen to an episode, I've taken away a better solution than I have had for a problem and have just been amazed. Thank you so much for those kind words there, Papa Muntz. I feel the same way when I talk to the guests too, where I already have an idea in mind and then I hear their idea, and that is an even cooler idea than the one I had. And then the two of our ideas kind of mix together and a whole new idea comes out. It's a lot of fun just talking about this stuff and seeing what comes out. Let's next hear from some of our hashtag EDU duct tape tweeters. First up was at Mrs. Tannen B. Debbie tweeted, students in at Miss Thomas VES kindergarten class at Vienna ES shared what they knew about computers by using Flipgrid and making models of computers. Thanks, hashtag CSNSF and at Bill Marsland for the great resources to get us started, and at Carly Mora for sharing hashtag CSNSF on hashtag EDU duct tape last week. Debbie also shared some awesome pictures of the activity and the students at work, but the best part is that what she was sharing was something she learned from this podcast. That is just such a cool feeling for me. Not only are people listening, but people are actually putting these things into practice. That's just trippy for me. It's like, it's far out, man. Like, you guys are out there listening and stuff, and then you even do it. But seriously, it is just so reaffirming to see this stuff happen. So please, when you try stuff out that you thought of or learned from the show, let me know. I love hearing about it. So thanks, Debbie, for sharing that. Next up, at Ann Radefeld, educational duct tape famous Ann Radefeld from episode 2, said, hey, at JakeMillerTech, I met a fellow hashtag duct taper at hashtag OETC19 at Mrs. Howell24, and I had a lot of fun in the ultimate field trip session with at Randall Sampson. Both Stephanie and Ann are listeners, and I love that they met and bonded over their listenership. This is fun to see as well. Real educators out in the wild, so to speak, not in the virtual world of Twitter, and bonding over a shared listenership to the show. When you meet other duct tapers out there, please share. This is really fun for me to see. Next up, at Mr. Oris Tech, also famous in educational duct tape world from episode 5, I think, said, I need some hashtag EDU duct tape for taking notes from episode 8 while driving and listening to at JakeMillerTech and at Angela Wotecki. So much good stuff. But seriously, any suggestions? And then he put in the emoji of the guy with the monocle. I normally go with the guy with the finger and the thumb making the L on the chin, like scratching the beard thinking, but he went with monocle. I guess you can go either way. Anyhow, so this prompted some really good ideas, probably excluding my idea of riding in an Uber every day so that you could take notes while you made your commute. And anyhow, some people had some really good ideas for how they do take notes while multitasking or in the car or whatever and listening to a podcast. But I know there's even more good ideas out there. So I asked Alex to put this up in the Flipgrid, which again, flipgrid.com/edu duct tape, or go to eduducttape.com and click on the Flipgrid link, so that he could post that question and then you can all share your thoughts. How do you take notes when you're listening to a content-rich show like this one? I hope that's not too immodest to say content-rich. I mean, there's a lot of different topics discussed. So how do you take notes when you're multitasking? What are your methods? So find Alex's post in that Flipgrid and share, and then maybe we'll use that content for an upcoming episode. At Abrams Tank 95, Mike said, my curiosity was piqued after hearing the 80s computerized introduction at the beginning of the hashtag EDU Duct Tape podcast, the depth of the EdTech content, and the John Moshida Micro Machines reference. I remember what episode that was, but I talked about speaking really fast like that guy from the old Micro Machines commercials. Anyhow, the John Moshida Micro Machines reference have me completely sold. Looking forward to each new episode. Mike then kicked it all up a notch with a Mr. T gif. The 80s overdose. This one really cracked me up. Thanks for that, Mike. Next up, this one didn't crack me up, it psyched me up. The official Twitter account of the Education Podcast Network at EduPodNet tweeted out on the 18th that Educational Duct Tape and the House of EdTech podcast were both in the top 10 on Apple Podcasts education list. As a matter of fact, we were number 3 and number 4 on that Apple Podcast education list that day. Wow. I'm going to hold off on teasing Chris Nessie from the House of EdTech about which one of us was higher ranked on that particular day. Or maybe I just did. Next up, at Virtual GIF, upcoming Educational Duct Tape guest Jen Giffen said, every time I use duct tape, I now think of at JakeMillerTech. If you have not checked it out already, you need to grab your nearest device and download the hashtag #EduDuctTapePodcast. Jake and his guests discuss education challenges and the tools you need to fix them. So Jen has discovered my top secret marketing plan here. My show is being advertised to you on a regular basis by these rolls of duct tape that you thought had other purposes in your life. That's a pretty good marketing scheme there, isn't it? Right? Name your podcast after something that people see in their everyday life, and then you're getting all that free advertising. Ingenious. Next up, let's just share the Twitter handles of our new hashtag #EduDuctTape tweeter. So we've got over 150 people that have used the hashtag since the beginning of the show, and these people are newbies as of this last week. At AbramsTank95, who we shared that tweet from earlier. At Andrea Eshelman, Eshelman, who I'm pretty sure works for Gale and Cengage Learning. So she was pretty excited about the discussion relating to Gale's resources that Angela Wotecki and I discussed. At Ben and Teach. Sorry. At Craig Clement, who was hosting the hashtag Ditchbook Twitter chat last week and heard from multiple people that he should check out the podcast. So he kind of live tweeted his experience with the show as he listened to a bunch of episodes. So thanks for that, Craig. At Irina_McGrath, her and her colleague shared some really cool uses of ideas they got from the show in their training. So that's great. At I Teach, the number 4, Success. At KM Wasmuth, WASSMUTH. At LMS_United. At Meg, MEAG, Bub, BUB. At Michelle Shorey, who is Irina's colleague. At Mr. MISTER Cavey. At Mo_Physics. At Tessa Bob 2001. At TealOhio_org, and at Troy X White. Next up, as always, let's hear somebody sharing something on the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid grid. Here is Angela.
Hi, Jake. My name is Angela Green, and I have a list of things here that I want to tell you. I just listened to the podcast. I've only listened to episodes 1 and 2, so I have a couple that I need to catch up on. I'm at Angela Green 12 on Twitter, and I'm also from Ohio, so that's exciting. I'm also the original namer of Screencastify's master screencaster Sharon Screen, and I'm here representing the more seasoned veteran teacher. I am a 31-year veteran of the classroom. Currently, I am teaching technology, and I'm also the professional learning facilitator for my district in Ohio. I just started a blog, Cafe Disco EdTech, at blogspot.com, and my featured audience is the veteran teacher who was skipped by good educational technology instructional training. So I think that you could broaden your audience if we could actually reach out to those teachers that were skipped in the whole EdTech movement in their teacher training, and they're not stuck, but maybe a little bit more tentative about trying new things. And that's what my blog is all about, and the resources that I have on my blog. I try to create resources for teachers to help them jump into this crazy world. What else did I want to tell you? I think that's all. The podcast is great. I need to go catch up on the rest of the episodes. So thanks, and keep going.
Plenty of great stuff there from Angela, and what you can't see because you're hearing her message instead of seeing it on Flipgrid is her cat Roger visiting during the video. I'm more of a dog guy, Angela, but Roger was pretty cute. And Angela, I love your idea about talking about how to facilitate older, more seasoned teachers who maybe are not as comfortable with technology, getting used to technology. So I think, Angela, me and you need to synchronize our watches and get you on the show sometime to think about some of your ideas for doing that. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for the idea. I think we'll have to revisit. Everybody, thank you for listening. Here we are at the 1 minute and 7 second mark or so. No, the 1 minute and 7 second mark was a long time ago. That was at the very beginning. This is the 1 hour and 7 minute mark. Thank you guys all for listening. This is a long show, and I appreciate you sticking with us. Have a great day, and I will see you next week when my guest is the one and only Matt Miller of Ditch That Textbook fame. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please consider rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app. #EduDuctTape.